The 1927 silent dark fantasy Faust by F.M. Murnau is freaking cool. This movie has everything. Horror, shocking special effects, sly comedy, slapstick, a terrific drama about a single mother, all in a meditation on how we fall into sin. It's not a perfect film, but it's utterly unique, and it's amazing to look at. German director F.W. Murnau never scrimped on style. Most famously, he scared the Ghiblies out of us with his expressionist adaptation of Dracula, Nosferatu. But he also did the bittersweet drama The Last Laugh about a doorman stripped of his uniform, and the exotic Taboo, which he filmed at great expense in Bora Bora with local amateur actors. His tearjerker about an unfaithful husband, Sunrise, is regarded among the greatest films of all time. But with the exception of the Count Orlok scenes in Nosferatu, I'd say his most impressive and stylish film is Faust. The cinematography in Faust could go toe-to-toe with Metropolis or even The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, though no film will ever match the art design of those two masterpieces. German Expressionism takes chiaroscuro to its limits, and in many of the classics it highlights the contrast between good and evil. The saintly Maria and her lascivious doppelganger in Metropolis, Count Orlok versus the German townsfolk in Nosferatu, Caligari and his somnambulist versus the narrator in The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and so on. In this case, it's the virginal Gretchen versus the devil himself, with Faust as the middleman, balancing lust and true love. What sets this film apart above those other classics, except Metropolis, which came out the following year, is the intensity of the special effects. We're given angels, a giant demon, galloping skeletons, magic circles, illuminated scrolls, flying capes, miniature landscapes, giant robot elephants, and much more. The technical work put into this is astounding, and its influence on later films is clear. Most obviously the Night on Bald Mountain sequence from Fantasia by Disney. Murnau's movie bucks the traditional three-act structure and turns in 4 acts plus a prologue and an epilogue. Prologue. A demon and an angel square off and make a wager for Faust's soul. Act 1. Murnau's Faust begins as a charitable doctor desperate to stop a plague caused by the devil, and is willing to heal the sick in the devil's name. Citizens give themselves up to bacchanalian debauches, declaring that they need to enjoy pleasure if death is on its way. A manic street preacher yells that they must repent, but he's taken down by the disease, causing mass hysteria. Desperate to find a cure, Faust sells his soul to a sickly beggar demon. This is one of the most effective parts of the film. Mephistopheles' relentless, nearly motionless beggar with shining eyes is unspeakably creepy. He arranges a 1-day free trial with Mephistopheles. Faust goes out to heal the people in his town, who realize eventually that his powers are satanic, and they try to stone him. Here we see Faust as both Christ and Antichrist. He walks away from the angry crowd just like Jesus avoiding stoning. But instead of doubling down on loving those who persecute him, Faust just gives up on humanity. Act 2. Mephistopheles, realizing he's running out of time and losing his grip on Faust, grants the old man youth. At this moment, the incredibly creepy beggar demon turns into a pantomime devil in an extravagant black outfit, leering and making faces like a comedian. Faust, now a hot young thing, plays around with his magical powers. He seduces a beautiful Italian duchess, and then it's too late to back out of his 1-day bargain with the devil. Act 3. Years later, a debauched Faust bends his attentions on seducing the pure Gretchen, using his good looks and a little black magic to melt her defenses. Meanwhile, Mephistopheles has interminable unfunny scenes trying to avoid Gretchen's lustful aunt. Eventually, Mephistopheles goads Gretchen's brother into a duel and stabs him in the back. It's cold-blooded murder, a change from the source material in Gounod and Goethe, who both had the devil trick Faust into accidentally stabbing her brother. Act 4. Faust ditches Gretchen, who becomes an outcast and eventually kills their baby in a frostbite-driven fever dream. The scenes of Gretchen dragging herself through the snow seeking shelter are desolate and heartbreaking. She's arrested for infanticide, and Faust is unable to save her. Epilogue. The angel annuls the devil's wager because, love? Is it perfect? No, but it's one of the most visually extravagant narrative films I've ever seen. It's a fun romp with tragic circumstances, showing that people wouldn't give in to sin if it wasn't so appealing, but also showing how your fun could mean the ruin of others. That's what sin means, after all. Trespass. Though there have been many, many versions of the Faust legend over the centuries, the ones that stand out are Christopher Marlowe's brash, semi-comic tragedy, 1604, Goethe's towering, complex masterwork, 1808 to 1832, and Gounod's opera, 1859, which boiled Goethe's then-recent classic down to its bare bones in a way similar to Murnau's silent film would, 67 years later. The story is essentially the same through all these interpretations, though the divergences are what's interesting. Marlowe's Faust is a bookworm who has pushed his knowledge to its limits and sees demonology as the next frontier in his intellectual growth. His refusal of redemption is seen by some critics as a hint at Calvinist predestination, although Christopher Marlowe's general irreverence towards religion makes me doubt this. Like a lot of early modern theater, the play is full of rowdy humor, including Faust using his powers to fly to Rome just to kick the Pope's butt. Goethe's Faust, who's far more serious, is a restless academic who will be released from his bargain with Satan if he never finds a moment to relax and truly cherish life on Earth. He uses his demonic power to hook up with Helen of Troy and raise a rapidly growing baby a la Twilight out in the woods. It's very bizarre. And he devotes himself to financial schemes and land reclamation projects. I mean, seriously, it's really weird. Gounod cuts out all the craziness of Goethe's Faust Part 2 and focuses on the romantic story of Faust and Gretchen, with the duel between Faust and her brother Valentin forming the climax. In this, Gounod is very similar to Murnau, though Murnau kept more of Goethe's complex structure. Side fact, the jewelry song of Madame Bianca Castafiore in the Tintin comics, which shatters glass, is actually Gretchen's sweet discovery of a love token from Gounod's opera. Goethe frames Faust's story with a wager between the devil and God. The pious Faust is a pawn to prove that no man can resist evil, similar to the wager in Job, that man only loves God in the good times. Murnau broadens the wager into a contest for the entire planet. Satan is prince of this world, and if he can prove through Faust that humans don't belong to God, the earth will be given to the devil. This ups the stakes considerably. Unfortunately, this cataclysmic frame story is tied off in the film's epilogue with a dramatic but unsatisfying resolution. The Archangel declares that love is all you need, and the devil is foiled. Surely there was a more philosophical and theologically sound way to wrap this up, but at least the movie doesn't end with punching in a skybeam. There have been more filmed versions of Faust than I can list. Bedazzled, The Devil and Max Devlin, Bedazzled, Phantom of the Paradise, several European versions, and at least 8 broadcasts of Marlowe's play by the BBC. Which begs the question, how do we go from this to this? And are still able to recognize the story. Just as our bodies are replaced cell by cell, and our personalities change throughout life, yet we retain our selfhood or soul, the Faust story has changed throughout history. Its motivations and trappings change. The soul of the story remains. Maybe what tempts Brendan Fraser is not what tempted Murnau or Goethe or Marlowe, but the idea of throwing caution to the wind and accepting a terrible fate in the name of short-term gratification, that's not new. However many fine performances of Gounod, Marlowe, and Goethe take place on the stage, or however many take place in your imagination, tucked up in your cozy easy chair by the fireside, Murnau gave us the greatest presentation ever of this story on celluloid.